Well, this week for our lead topic, Governor of California, Gavin Newsom, went on the Shawn Ryan podcast, which, by the way, is my favorite podcast funded by the military-industrial complex. And he did 4 hours on this show. 4 hours. The total episode was like 4 hours and 12 minutes. When you subtract the ads and all the bullshit, it was about 4 hours, give or take. And I watched the whole thing. I listened to the entire episode, and I was visibly irritable for a while after it was over. Because here's what I'll say. First off, Shawn Ryan creeps me out. Okay, the guy's ex-Navy SEAL, went into the CIA, definitely did some shit. He has an interview, and I don't know if he's being serious here, but it's a weird thing to joke about, where he talks about how he was doing some undercover stuff, looking into drug cartels, and then just kind of casually admits that, yeah, I was making so much money as an undercover looking into the drug cartels that I just kind of started my own drug cartel. I don't know if he was being serious or what the case was. Weird thing to joke about. But his interview style makes my interview style, and I've been accused of not being harsh enough on people because I don't do the fireworks and yelling and screaming like it's Piers Morgan on here. But he makes my interviewing style look like Morton Downey Jr. Do you know who Morton Downey Jr. was? No relation to Robert. He was a talk show host in the 80s, and he would have people on, like political folks, and he would get in their face and he would scream at them, insult them. He would blow secondhand cigarette smoke in their face. I mean, it was chaos what Morton Downey Jr. would do. But he makes the way this guy just softball after softball, didn't check him. He'd throw out your token, quote unquote, tough question, let Newsom lie his way through it, and then just move on without checking him. I mean, it was a bad interview. I don't think I can watch Shawn Ryan in the same way. And I like some of his episodes, even though he creeps me out. I like some of the stuff he does. Now, I got a lot of shit on X for this because I initially defended Shawn Ryan when he was having Newsom on the show. I said, look, we can't be like the left where we totally shut out the other side. I'm not saying we have to hear them out on their ideas and change our beliefs for it. What I'm saying is the left, in their ability, and this started at the grassroots and went all the way up to the tippy top with Kamala Harris back in 2024, the left, their refusal to even listen to anybody on the other side blindsided them. For the same reason that a football team watches game film of their opponent, you need to watch what the other side is saying. Again, not so that you can adopt their beliefs the same way the football team isn't going to switch up their offense to mimic the team whose game film they're studying. No, you want to know how you can stop it. How do I game plan against my opponent? What are they saying? What's the reality and the context to what they're saying? How are they going to spin what I'm going to say? It's debate prep 101. And we have to understand how to counter these things because people are watching. Even when we have these minuscule debates at bars and with our coworkers and in other locations like that, we need to be able to defend ourselves because those people that are watching that are on the fence are going to be swayed by someone who knows how to talk. And the talking points come from the top, and it's looking like Newsom's going to be the top. That's all I was saying. I caught a lot of shit for daring to suggest this. So here was my mindset going into this, because we've covered Newsom, and I listened occasionally to his podcast, like 20, 30 minutes, just to see what he's saying on there. And I've told you he understands how the political game is played. But this is the first real deep dive I've gotten into Gavin Newsom, the person, right? And as bad as Ryan did at this interview, I think it actually, from my perspective, it helped me understand what we're dealing with here. I went into this thinking Newsom was a far left, like AOC style socialist lunatic. And then I went out of it believing this guy stands for absolutely nothing other than obtaining power. He governed to the far left his entire time in California because that's what the people there wanted. And then when he started talking about becoming president, or when the speculation began, he started to move closer to the center. Make no mistake, if Gavin, in another universe, in another a parallel timeline where Gavin Newsom's born in Arkansas, this guy is the most far-right MAGA conservative you'll ever see. Because the beliefs are not important. The ideologies to Gavin Newsom are not important. The only thing that matters is that those beliefs can be used as a vehicle to get him to his end destination, which is more power. This is a textbook, and I'm not a psychiatrist. I can't make diagnoses. But when I look at this guy, I see a textbook psychopath. Plus he looks like American Psycho. I'm dead serious on this. And I've looked into the eyes of some soulless politicians face to face and seen something similar in them. I don't believe that this guy, Gavin Newsom, has ever had a genuine human thought or emotion that didn't have an ulterior motive behind it. That he didn't have some type of angle. I don't think the man has ever loved anybody. I don't think the man has ever hated anybody. I don't think he's ever been angry or excited or sad or anything. I think everything he has ever done has been a play to achieve more power, to achieve some type of end goal. I'm dead serious about that. So here's my summary, and we'll break down some of the talking points that he had on there. First off, we were talking about J.D. Vance's Disneyland trip. Check out what Newsom tweeted before we get into this. At Vance. He said, "Hope you enjoy your family time at J.D. Vance. The families you're tearing apart certainly won't." And then Vance replies to it, "Had a great time. Thanks." But here's my summary of this interview. So Shawn Ryan, he'll have people tell him a little bit about themselves before the interview starts so he can get up a bio. That's one of the things he always does. So if Shawn Ryan interviews you, if he interviewed me, he'd say Caleb Salvatore, he's a comedian, podcaster, social commentator, the best looking man alive. But what they always end with on Shawn Ryan, because Shawn Ryan's a Christian, what he always ends with is he says, and most importantly, he's a Christian. He didn't say that with Gavin Newsom, and that was the first thing I noticed, because Newsom's talked about how strong his Catholic faith is, even though he's kind of drifted away from it. Again, you'll find that to be a common trend with Newsom. He says a lot of words that when you actually sit down and think about them, they really don't mean a whole lot. He likes to filibuster. The man's the deflector in chief. He is the master of what I call quarter truths, because there's so many lies in them that they're not a half truth. It's a quarter truth. He's got a Texas-sized chip on his shoulder because he knows how many people he's lost to Texas. California was the #1 state in the country over the last couple years for U-Haul rentals, and Texas was the #1 state for U-Haul returns. So you go ahead and do the math on that right there. He's lost a lot of people to Texas and Florida, and he knows it. And he's got a real chip on his shoulder about it because he brings it up and compares everything California does to Florida and Texas. The other thing I have written down here is that he curses like a 6th grader who just learned how to use bad words. I'm telling you, I'm not exaggerating. He used the word goddamn, or God damn it, God damned, some variation of the words, at least 100 times. Probably closer to 150. I'm not kidding you. Not a joke. I'm not kidding you.
Not a joke.
He used the word bullshit quite a bit, and he used the words for Christ's sake quite often as well. Let me tell you, I'm not one of those people that clutches pearls when people say goddamn or Jesus Christ. I'm not. I say it sometimes. I try not to. I don't do it on purpose. I let it slip, but I'm not one of those, "Oh, you took our Lord's name in vain" type. That's not me. I get it. It slips. It happens. But he was clearly making a point to say it here. Why? Your guess is as good as mine. It got to the point where I'm listening to this and I'm like, dude, come on. Like, this is a little over the top. Nobody curses like that. Because that's the thing, is cursing, there is a point of diminishing returns with cursing. They say intelligent people curse more. I don't think I believe that. I think intelligent people know when to drop a well-timed F-bomb. But we all know that person that every other word out of their mouth is fuck this, fuck that. And we all know that person's not very intelligent. Those are always stupid people because they use it as a filler word to make up for their lack of vocabulary. Newsom's not stupid, though. So this is an intentional filler. And my guess is that this is because some consultant who's being paid way too much money told him, hey, this is how the plebs talk. They cuss. You know, you're in a room with a tough guy like Shawn Ryan, right? You got to get on his level, his audience's level. These blue-collar, right-wing leaning people, you got to talk like them, and they cuss. And he's on there making a clown out of himself. It's the most unbelievable. It's so hard to believe that this is how he really talks. It's so clearly an act, but you know this consultant sitting over there, they still don't get it. Just good, rubbing their hands together like he's just acing this. I mean, he said goddamn, so he sounded like Boomhauer from King of the Hill with his dang ol'. Goddamn was, I'm serious, it was close to every other word. Every other sentence. Every other sentence had goddamn in it. 4 hours of that. You know, and that's the thing, is they think that the cursing makes you more relatable to blue-collar folks, to Midwesterners, to middle-class Americans. That's not the case, though. And it still shows they haven't learned their lesson. Because Midwesterners, we're not stupid, even though you guys think we are. We don't want you to be just like us. We understand there are different types of people from different walks of life, and that's okay because it makes the country what it is. It's not a requirement for the average middle-class American blue-collar worker from the Midwest that you be just like him. All they want is for you to be authentic. I don't come from money. I have friends who do. They don't try to act like me. They act like themselves. We have a good laugh about it sometimes. But at the end of the day, I don't judge them because they don't try to put on some weird facade and try to meet me at my upbringing. That's not how it works. We appreciate authenticity, not relatability, right? The reason that when Donald Trump comes out and acts unprofessional and cusses or whatever, the reason that works is because that's authentically Donald Trump. That's not an act he's putting on. You got to consider how these two came up. They're both coastal elites from rich families. They both came up. They're both very successful business moguls, right? Here's the difference, though. Donald Trump came up in casinos and real estate. So he's dealing with casino staff, gamblers, probably some mafia guys, union hall blue collar employees, truck drivers, maintenance workers, the occasional tenant when your property manager calls in sick who is cussing you out because they're not going to pay the rent till the goddamn water heater's fixed and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, Newsom's your tenant. Blah, 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 blah. Those are the types of people Trump came up dealing with. So naturally, he adopted their vocabulary. Gavin Newsom ran a winery. Mia, do you think the average person in Napa Valley, where Newsom's winery was, can you imagine the average like plumber walking into Newsom's elite winery? Yeah, fuck this bullshit. I mean, could you imagine that? So he's going off just like Tim Walz did with what he sees on TV. So that's why the cursing doesn't work for Gavin Newsom. The other thing I noticed is that, and this is the summary of the whole interview from Newsom's perspective. Everyone who's ever criticized him is full of shit. The only thing he ever has done wrong is having a dinner party during COVID. California's perfect. They don't have any problems whatsoever. That's why they saw a bigger hiatus in terms of volume and per capita than any other state in the country during his reign. forget that though. Any other state that's doing anything right is only getting it right because they copied what he's doing in California. They're leading in every aspect, everything. They're the lead in everything. If you ask Gavin Newsom, tech, they're leading it. Crime fighting, hilariously, if you ask Gavin Newsom, they're the innovators on that one. They're out at the front on stopping crime. Energy, AI, they're leading on all of it. I mean, I think they should have just asked Newsom just different industries. They just should have kept bringing up different industries to see what he said. So how about child diamond mines? Oh, California's the leader in child diamond mines, Sean. Human trafficking. Listen, Sean, there is no one that traffics more humans per capita in the goddamn country than goddamn California. Okay? He didn't say that, but that's probably what he would have said. So I watched the first 2 hours of it, and I needed a drink. And I went and got my... made my old fashioned, and I sat down and listened to the next 2 hours. I was doing other things. I didn't just sit down and listen to it. But the first 2 hours into it, I'm sitting here thinking, oh my God, I don't think we can beat this guy. Because the way he fires these quarter truths off in such a rapid fire manner, I don't understand. I don't know how you counter that in a debate, in a formal debate setting. That's not a podcast, but a formal, so like CNN, MSNBC, Fox News types debates where you sit there and he has his 90 seconds to make a point, and then you have your 90 seconds to make a point. The guy will rattle off 4 quarter truths. So 4 things that have an element of truth to them, but are lacking a whole lot of context that actually totally flip around what he's saying. Totally disprove what he's saying and make the opposite point if he would tell you the whole story behind them. But the problem in a formal debate setting is you have 90 seconds. So are you going to spend all 90 of your seconds addressing his lies and never getting your policy points out? That's exactly how he plays. His goal is to make you either constantly play defense or try to outscore him in a shootout. There's no balanced game with Gavin Newsom. You've either got to go blow for blow, rattling off all these crazy facts and statistics with him, or you've got to play defense and address every single lie he made while never getting your point across. So I'm sitting there like, oh my God, how do we beat this guy? And then in the last 2 hours of it, I did a 180. The last 2 hours, I went, oh, the more people get exposed to this guy, the more they're going to realize he's full of shit. We got him. Because here's the thing about Newsom. He's as charismatic as they come. But in today's day and age, that's a curse. Charisma is a good thing, specifically in politics, to a point. But there gets to a point where you're so charismatic that people don't trust you. And that's with anything. That's with the guy you're buying a car from, with politicians, whatever. There gets to a point because people are so used to being lied to in every aspect of their lives that when they see someone who is that charismatic, they put their guard up and they go, I don't know what it is about you, but you disturb my peace. I can't put my finger on it. I do not trust you, though. And that's the effect he's going to have on people. In a debate and little interview clips, it'll work. But I don't see this guy surviving a 5 to 6 month long election campaign, politically surviving, that is, where people are constantly exposed to him because they're going to start seeing through it. That's the difference. Everything about him, it feels forced, and there's just something off. And that's it. So they broke down quite a bit in this interview, and we're going to talk about a lot of it. We're not going to replay the whole thing, obviously, but I want to hit on a couple of issues. So the first thing they did is Shawn Ryan gave him a handgun as a gift. He gives everyone a gift that comes onto his show. Usually it's like candy or some shit like that. But he gave him a handgun because he had a friend at a gun dealer that just wanted to get Newsom holding a cig on camera, and they got it, and it was a photo op. Now, Shawn Ryan immediately turns to him and says, okay, so we're talking about guns. Newsom says he's a big Second Amendment guy, which anyone who's ever lived in California will laugh at that upon hearing it. But he's a big Second Amendment guy. And he loves guns. He just wants some, what he refers to as common sense restrictions on them. Now, that's where it gets dangerous. It also gets dangerous when you hear people bring up that they were a hunter. That's always code for, I want to take your guns. I think you should be able to have a 2-shot rifle. They tried that shit with Tim Walz. I think you should be able to have a rifle with 3 rounds in it, but anything more than that, what do you need that for? Are you going to shoot up a school with it? I always love that argument, by the way, when they ask you, what do you need it for? What do you need 17 rounds in your handgun for? What do you need it for? I had a conversation with somebody like that one time, and he didn't have anything to say back to me. I was out of town for a comedy show, and I was talking to a friend, and he's like, what do you need all those rounds in a gun for? I'm like, let me tell you this right now, man. My wife's, she wasn't my wife at the time. She's I think we were engaged at the time. But I'm like, my fiance's sitting at home right now. I'm 5 hours away. If she were to call me right now and say somebody's breaking down the front door, would you suggest that she go get the gun with 3 rounds in it, or the one with 15, or the one with 30? I want the most rounds possible. They didn't have nothing to say back to that. It's like, oh, that's a good point. This wasn't a friend. It was a comic that was on a show I was in. Like, that's a good point. It's because it is. So Shawn Ryan asked him, because Shawn Ryan's a vet. He goes, okay, so, you talk about background checks, right? People with felonies, people who have been in the nut hut, people who are domestic abusers. What about veterans who come back from the war and they have depression and they have PTSD? Should they be allowed to have guns under these red flag laws? And that's a big question, because in a lot of these anti-gun states, you get these veterans that come back and they don't seek out the help they need because they're afraid if they go and they tell their therapist at the VA, hey, I'm fucked up from what I saw overseas, man. That therapist is going to red flag them and have the police come and take their guns, and they're not going to be able to defend their family. So you get people, it creates a problem that could have been avoided because you get these guys come back and they don't want to seek help because they're worried, because people like Gavin Newsom's policies put the fear of God into them. Mia, do you know how Gavin Newsom answered that question when he said, should vets with PTSD and depression be allowed to own guns? You know what he said? And I wrote it down word for word, and I quote, I hear you, but I don't want felons and domestic abusers to own guns. So he really addressed the question. Really, he did a real good job addressing that question. So that tells, sometimes no response is a response. So that tells you everything you need to know. If you're a vet who's ever seen a therapist, President Gavin Newsom doesn't think you should have a gun. Keep that in mind. By the way, when he says, I don't want felons and domestic abusers to own guns, nowhere in the country can those guys own guns. There's some states where if you're like a white collar felon who you didn't kill or rape somebody, you embezzled money, you can own a gun. Nowhere in the country can violent felons and domestic abusers own firearms. Nowhere. He didn't check him on that. He didn't, because that's the thing, is they accused Rogan of being too soft on people, but Rogan would have immediately went back to it and gone, okay, but do you think that vets with PTSD and depression should be able to own guns? He would have made him answer it. At the very least, given him a second opportunity to answer it, and if he again deflected, being the deflector in chief that he is, everyone would have known. There would have been no way to write that off. It's like, okay, we know how you actually feel on that issue. He brings up his skeet shooting. My family, we're big into skeet shooting, which, again, total coastal elitist sport. Total I'm better than you. Nine Rivers Country Club types. You know what? Like that. That's where they do it at. Listen, this guy doesn't want you. He says banning an AR-15 is common sense gun laws. This guy doesn't want you to own an AR-15. I know people who know people that have worked for Gavin Newsom and his family. That fucking piece of shit every weekend goes to his family's private range on their land and pops a couple hundred rounds off with his AR-15. Rules for thee, not for me. Oh, yeah, I dropped that one. Oh, he brings up about, so he talks the entire time about how concealed carry laws make us more or make states more dangerous. You can look at the murder rate of every state from before and after they legalized concealed carry. And when you actually break it down state by state and look at the timelines, you'll see that it really doesn't make a difference either way. In murder, in violent crime, anything. That the crime will either rise or drop at the rate that the rest of the country, at a similar rate to the rest of the country. There's a few outliers, but for the most part, you don't see any changes. But according to Newsom, it makes it more dangerous. And that's because the people that you don't want carrying guns weren't waiting for it to become legal. These gangbangers and drug dealers, that most of them are already probably convicted felons, aren't going, oh, well, I better go get the proper permitting to carry my firearm. Now that it's legal, I mean, I know my entire existence is funded by illegal activity, but now that it's legal, I'm going to start packing heat. I've been walking around with slingshots up until now. It's common sense, right? So you also have to look that defensive gun use often deters crime without shots being fired. So even if you do see an uptick in deaths, you see an even bigger uptick in defensive uses of firearms when states legalize concealed carry, which typically anywhere between 5-1 to 10-1 outweighs the gun death rate. By the way, when they say, you gotta listen to these people's words, because words matter. They say gun deaths. When they don't say gun murders, they'll say gun deaths, which includes suicides. Just something to keep in mind. By the way, Japan, way higher suicide rate than the US. They're not allowed to get anywhere near a gun. Somebody wants to kill themselves, they're going to do it. There's better ways to do it, by the way. It's only like 60 to 80% of people who shoot themselves in the head actually finish the job. Fun fact. Not so fun fact. They brought up, let's see here, do we have the gender affirming care video on there? Or no? Yeah, play the gender affirming care video when he gets pressed on that.
What about for your values? I mean, is 8 years old too young?
Yeah, I mean, look, I now that I have a 9-year-old, just became 9. Come on, man.
9-year-old just became
I get
9.
it. So those are legit. You know, it's interesting. Just the issue of age. I haven't. It's interesting. As someone that's.
Mia, how many men do you know that sit like that?
Not even my gay brother.
No.
Or gay brother-in-law sit
No.
like that.
I've never met a man who folds his legs like that. That just hurts my nuts even looking at it. Okay, go ahead.
It's been so focused on equality, broadly, LGBT rights, particularly gay marriage. Mm-hmm. The trans issue for me is also novel. It's over the last few years. I'm trying to understand as much as anyone else. Whole pronoun thing, trying to understand all of that. What, you know, that was like the hell. I mean, all that stuff. I get it.
See, they asked him about gender affirming care for 8-year-olds. He stutters, says absolutely nothing of substance, and then changes the subject to gay marriage. Those are two totally different subjects, bro. Totally different subjects. That you'll see rare moments like that when they have him. Because eventually, when you put them under a torture test long enough, they're going to fuck up. And that's what you saw right there. He didn't know how to answer that question. Because he knows it is a wildly, wildly unpopular view with 90% of the country. But with that 10%, that, my God, they just love giving 8-year-olds vasectomies, right? That's a make or break, and that's a demographic that he cannot afford to lose if he wants to carry his party's primary. So he doesn't know how to answer the question. And that's why you saw him stuttering like a buffoon right there. So they asked him about immigration. We got 2 videos on immigration. Go ahead and play the one about Trump.
All that reputational damage that's being done as they're sitting there on horses with American flags running through soccer fields, scaring kids that are playing soccer in the middle of the day at a summer camp. For what? Just toughness. It's a weakness masquerading as strength. That's what I don't like about this son of a bitch. I don't. And forgive me, I know he's the president of the United States. Forgive me, I didn't, yeah, he calls me new scum. Come on. I mean, how do I explain that to my kid? Now I have my kids' friends calling my kids new scum. That I get, because I was called that in 7th grade, but not by a 79-year-old. Model better goddamn behavior, man. Forgive the goddamn.
I love how Trump has got his kid being bullied in school now. I was called new scum and said, I'm going to keep that to myself. You know what I mean? So obviously Trump didn't start this. Like, this has been a trend in your life of people calling you scum. I might keep that one to myself. You know what I mean? We got one more here. Go ahead, play the second one.
All that reputational damage that's being done.
All these mixed status families. $8.5 billion in tax collection in California every year from undocs. $8.5 billion that we receive just at the state level of taxes. That was the last Pew estimate. So it's not insignificant. Backbone, I mean, it's half of our agriculture work. You care about farmers and ranchers? If that's what your number one go-to commitment, then you sure as hell should care about their workers. 41% of our construction workers, Texas and California have the highest percentage of their construction workers that would fall into that category. How the hell do we rebuild Altadena and Palisades? We're going to need a peak next year. We estimate about 70,000 workers. Without that workforce, ain't going to happen. You're struggling here. You imagine a peak there. So I think there needs to be a pathway for those folks as we secure the border, and we own that issue.
Do you feel that they're taking American jobs?
Not in Tulare County. Not in Ventura County. I don't know many people that want a job out there in those packing facilities. Mm-hmm. I don't see many people look like me jumping at those jobs. I just don't. Maybe there's some exceptions. I haven't seen the evidence of that.
That wasn't a delay in the video, by the way. That was his ventriloquist that feeds him his answers was a step behind there. Gavin Newsom, who owns a bunch of wineries in Napa Valley, doesn't know anyone who wants to work in a meatpacking plant. Can you believe that? What a surprise. Who would have thought? He said the quiet part out loud there. So he threw a big fit because last weekend they did an ICE raid at a marijuana field, a legal marijuana field, but a marijuana field nonetheless in California. And they busted a bunch of 14-year-old kids that had been working there. So it was child labor exploitation. So when Newsom talks about the quote-unquote backbone of his state's economy being these undocumented workers, he's talking about child labor. He's talking about people who are being paid half of minimum wage with no benefits, with no overtime, with no bathroom breaks, who were told, hey, you can go ahead and ask for more money. You can go ahead and ask for me to treat you like a human being. But the second you do that, I'm just going to call immigration and have you deported. And I'll have a bus down at the border before you're even sent back, ready to pick me up 20 more workers just like you who are willing to work for half of what I was paying you. That's the backbone of Gavin Newsom's economy. When these people tell you who they are, believe them. I mean, this is like 200 years ago. If you would have had the governor of South Carolina, well, you can't get rid of slavery. It's the backbone of our economy. It's the same thing. That is the modern. We're going to look back on the way they're doing these undocumented workers and the way these people have defended them. We're going to look back on that not quite as bad, but in a similar light as slavery, because that's what it is. It is the modern version of slavery. You pay these people wages that there's no way in hell they could have any type of quality of life on, and then you threaten them, hey, we'll just have you deported back to your country where you're probably going to be killed if you tell anybody. I mean, it's monstrous. And Gavin Newsom says it's the backbone of his economy. I'll tell you the same thing I was talking about when somebody told me that they can't release the Epstein files because it would collapse our government. If your state's economy is propped up on child labor and the exploitation of people who can barely speak a lick of English, it needs to fucking collapse. You need to start over and play on an even playing field with everybody else. Newsom goes on to say that these ICE raids, that deporting everybody who's here illegally is too far. He supports deporting people who are here illegally that are also criminals. Ryan, to his credit, turned around and asked him, but how do you know who's a criminal? And he goes, you just know, man. You just know, God damn it. Then he says he doesn't support amnesty, because that was a rumor that was being floated around. He doesn't support amnesty because we learned our lesson on amnesty in 1986 with Reagan. But then about 10 minutes later, Newsom says, let's get a bill passed on amnesty. So which is it, American psycho? Which is it? That's just one of the many issues he's terrible on and lied through his teeth. We got a whole lot more here. This is probably going to be most of our show. We'll get to Store Brand TMZ, and I might have to do like a bonus show on Sunday, or maybe we'll do a Thursday midnight session. Those are fun. But so he says he referred to California, this is another lie that I have written down here, as a quote-unquote donor state. Here's the quote. California is a donor state. We provided $83.1 billion more than we received from the federal government. Texas took $71.1 billion more than they sent. Now, at the surface, this is one of those quarter truths. That's true. That's how much money was paid into the federal government, and that's how much the federal government invested into those states. However, there's a lot of missing context here. This is intentionally misleading. Number one, it doesn't adjust for population or per capita. California has 9 million more people in it than Texas does for the last census, right? So you've got 9 million more people paying taxes to the federal government. Naturally, that's going to increase it. On a per capita basis, California, per resident, takes in $2,100 from the federal government more than they're paying out. Texas, on the other hand, has a surplus of $2,300 per resident, more than they're bringing in from the federal government. So raw dollar comparisons will make California look a lot more extreme than it really is. The other thing is that number is all federal funding. He paints it ambiguously on purpose so that the average person hears it and thinks, wow, Texas is this huge federal welfare state. That's not just federal welfare. That's all of the federal money that enters Texas, including things like military bases, which Texas is the number one in the country for. VA benefits. Texas has far more the red states tend to have more veterans in them than blue states. There's also this little agency in Texas called NASA that has a annual budget of $25 billion a year. That's included in that number. And then per USA Facts. So when you actually break down federal welfare, grants from the federal government to state and local governments per state, California by far receives more money in federal welfare from the government than any other state in the country at $163 billion. The next closest is New York at $110 billion. After that is Texas with 105. Then it's all the way down to Florida with 58.8. So that is an outright lie. Well, yeah, it's a quarter truth. On the surface, he's painted it in a way that you can't say it's a lie. But when you actually, and this is the problem in a debate where you have 90 seconds to 2 minutes, you can't break it down the way I just did. So yes, you have more people paying taxes out in federal income tax because there's more people in California. Texas has NASA. They've got all these military bases. They've got a far bigger southern border. So you've got the Border Patrol has a serious presence. So the federal government's spending more money in Texas, but it's not welfare that's keeping the state afloat. It's money that's being invested in other federal assets. California blows everybody out of the water when it comes to federal welfare. That's 50% more than Texas in federal welfare going into California. They receive more money from the federal government per resident than Texas, twice as much. It's not even close. So it's, again, total lie. The next thing he brought up was that San Francisco, Shawn Ryan said, okay, so San Francisco cleaned up. We talked about this on the show. You know, San Francisco, you got drug addicts passing out on the street, people shitting on the sidewalks. It's just a very nasty, messy city, crime-ridden and everything. Shawn Ryan said, hey, we all saw the videos. When Xi Jinping came to visit from China, you guys cleaned up the streets. Like, that all went away quick, so it leaves people to wonder, hey, couldn't you have done this all along? Gavin Newsom said that was bullshit. So don't believe your lying eyes. What you saw, that was bullshit. He said, and the reason it was bullshit was not because it didn't go down exactly like that. The reason it was bullshit is because they didn't just roll the red carpet out for Xi. They did it for everyone that was coming. So that, again, everything. He goes on about investments were made to prepare the city. Basically filibusters for 5 minutes, only to circle back and say it was true. A long answer to say, yeah, that's pretty much what we did. And I don't have an explanation for why it couldn't have been done before that. Sorry. They bring up crime. Talk about all the shoplifting you see in California. Say, hey, you know, we see these videos of people stealing stuff in California and the police won't even show up. You know, they got like $700-800 worth of stuff at a Walgreens and they just walk right out. Police don't do anything. What's going on with that? And Newsom said that's bullshit. Noticing a trend here. Every criticism is bullshit. And then he immediately pivoted to Texas. He said you can steal $950 in California before it's a felony. You steal $2,500 in Texas before it's a felony. Which again is true at the surface, but it doesn't tell the full story. Yes, you can steal $2,400 in Texas and it won't be a felony. The difference is, if you walk out of a store in Texas having shoplifted $850 worth of shit, and they call the police on you, the police are going to come and they're going to hit you with the misdemeanor. And then if you took that merchandise and you sold it or did whatever, they're going to throw the book at you and prosecute you to the full extent of the law. If you walk into a store in San Francisco and steal $800 worth of stuff, nothing happens. That store owner calls the police 9 times out of 10. They're not even going to show up. Texas offers far less prosecutorial discretion as well. They have to try these people that are doing these things. They don't get to just let them off because it's in the name of rehabilitation or some other California progressive bullshit. Texas prosecutes approximately, by the way, 70% of felony shoplifting cases. So when they talk about that felony limit, only half of them in California ever get prosecuted. So even if you steal over $1,000 and you get arrested and charged with a felony, there's a 50% chance they just let you go in California. So the Newsom is very, very talented at not telling the whole story and giving himself just enough of an out on every issue. And they brought up COVID. They brought up COVID, which we all know he did a great job at. Joe Rogan got to ask a question. He didn't call in, but he emailed it in because he's friends with Shawn Ryan. He said, hey, you know, do you still stand by giving COVID vaccines to little kids? Newsom said, no one's fought Big Pharma more than me. Because that's how you fight them, is you require that their product be purchased by everybody in your state to be able to work or go to the grocery store or take public transportation. Sure. He said he kept comparing it to red states. He said California, like many red states included, moved forward on a vaccine early. He said Florida shut down restaurants and bars before California did. Again, quarter truth. Florida did shut down bars and restaurants before California, but there's a lot of context that you're missing there. Florida has a lot more old people than California, so naturally they were a little bit more cautious. Florida also reopened after a month, whereas California stayed locked down until June of 2021, over a year and a half, or close to a year and a half. Little bit of an important detail that American Psycho left out there. They asked him, do you think you did anything wrong during COVID? And Newsom said just now before, crazy timing, Mia. Just before they went on the show, he had asked his team to do a full audit and review of what they did right and wrong during COVID. Great timing. Great timing. It's like I like to watch Caleb Hammer do the financial audit show. And you'll always hear him tell people, why don't you get in a budget? Why don't you start a diet? Whatever, just to save money. And they go, oh, I just started. They always just started it right before they go on the show. How much you want to bet that his team they'll find he did nothing wrong? Because that seems to be a common trend with Gavin, which is that he never does anything wrong. He claimed from he said Florida had worse educational outcomes during COVID than California. Kids did worse on reading and math scores in 8th grade. Kids did worse on 4th grade reading and 8th grade math. Very, very specific. Well, the reason he brought those two up is because those were the only two grades and subjects that California kids outperformed Florida kids in after COVID. Everything else, Florida won. Florida also, let me hear it. So I got the numbers right here. Says, where was it at here? I just had it right in front of me. Says Florida scores declined more, but we're already higher than California, and we're still either the same or slightly ahead of California by 2022. So it's a lie. So he took 2 grades and one subject in each grade where his students outperformed Florida students in and said, look, we beat Florida. Because he took that's like if you get beat in a football game 75-6 and the other team just throws the ball every play and they throw it for 600 yards and they never run it. And you're like, look, we won the game. We had more rushing yards. Like, okay, but what's the scoreboard say? Who turned the ball over more? Who had more total yards? Who had less total yards surrendered on defense? Like, these are all important details, but you're asking me just to look at the total rushing yards. Little odd there, huh? Let's see, what other bullshit claims did he make? I'm just going down my notes at this point. I mean, it's so ridiculous the crap this guy got away with saying on here. He said, from a wealth perspective, when he was talking about how great California did during COVID, from a wealth perspective, Florida's GDP contracted more than California's. Again, a quarter truth, but what he leaves out is shortly after Florida's GDP contracted, it exploded into the number 1 most healthy economy in the country. California still has not recovered from COVID and the lockdown procedures. Do you see how he does this? A quick bullet point quarter truth where he doesn't have someone fact checking him on the spot. It's very, very effective. Very effective. Very difficult to beat in a formal debate setting. The only type of politician that could successfully debate somebody like Gavin Newsom would be Donald Trump, because he's so unorthodox. This doesn't work on a politician like him, because Trump dominates the pace of the debate. Newsom doesn't. They asked him about his little dinner party during COVID, during the restrictions at the French Laundry restaurant, where he had an indoor dinner party, maskless, with more than the allotted amount of people you were allowed to have in your home during the COVID lockdowns. And his response to that was, I did not close every winery but mine. That's bullshit. Nobody said that. That's called a straw man argument. You build up something that's way easier to tear down than the question you were actually asked. But he did, to his credit, admit to the restaurant. That's the one mistake Newsom's ever made in his life. Do you know that? Was going to that dinner party during COVID maskless. He said it was when we were... And even then, he still can't admit total wrongdoing. Even then. He said, I attended a dinner party right toward the end when we were coming out of COVID, and I paid a price for it. I beat the shit out of myself. That was his words. What the price is, we don't know. The problem is that dinner party was in November of 2020. November of 2020, when he says, because he tries to paint it as it wasn't a big deal because we were coming out of COVID. His state kept its full COVID restrictions in place until June of 2021. So either you're lying and you're trying to make it sound like it wasn't as bad and egregious as it was, while simultaneously, because that's the textbook narcissist right there, is even when they admit that they got something wrong, when they got caught red-handed, they will either try to blame someone else for it or minimize it and make it seem like it's not as big of a deal for X, Y, and Z reason. And he kind of threw other people under the bus too, because he got invited to the dinner party. He didn't host it. He made sure we knew that as well. So you either lied about us coming out of COVID, or you kept your state locked down for 7 extra months for no reason. Which one is it, Gavin? Which one is it? So the guy's just a textbook compulsive liar. I mean, this is a guy that if he's not in politics, he's probably hitchhiking at rest stops and strangling women in their cars. Have you heard his backstory? Let me read his backstory to you. He was raised by a single mother who worked 3 jobs in a 2-bedroom apartment, including rent. They had to rent one of the bedrooms out just to make ends meet, right? But he somehow went to the most affluent Catholic school in San Francisco. He's also Nancy Pelosi's nephew. Nancy just leaves her family out to dry like that, you know? He said he started 21 businesses. The quote from him in the interview. He claims, I started 21 businesses with no trust funds, right out of college, pen to paper. Now, the reason he's, again, quarter truths. He didn't start it from a trust fund. That's true. He didn't inherit a bunch of money to start his business. He likes to make himself sound like this lower middle class American dream. Here's the problem. 10 out of his first 11 businesses were startups funded by Gordon Getty. Yes, that Gordon Getty, a family friend and the 4th generation owner of Getty Oil. So yeah, it's technically true. He didn't get a trust fund. He just got investments from his dad's billionaire oil tycoon buddy. So relatable. Mia, why haven't we called up our parents' oil tycoon friends to invest in some of our business ideas? Why haven't we thought like every lower middle class family on the planet has? Why haven't we thought of that? Newsom's also the godfather of another heir to the Getty family throne. I love he just tries to be this environmentalist that he's got all these deep ties to big oil. I mean, you could argue there is no Gavin Newsom without oil money. How many single mothers working 3 jobs, renting out a spare room in their apartment, have that type of connection? Where a billionaire tycoon, if you listen to Newsom, a billionaire oil tycoon met this, according to him, street kid and was like, you know what? I like the way you talk. I'm going to take a risk on you. I'm going to invest millions of dollars in 10 businesses for you. He said he took 2.5 years to open up his winery. Again, that's how you know this is bullshit. That's how you know this is bullshit. Because lower middle class kids start successful companies all the time. You hear about it all the time. There isn't one on the planet. There isn't one lower middle class kid on the planet living with a single mom working 3 jobs in a 1-bedroom apartment who opens up a winery in Napa Valley. That's not what they go to. They take skills that they have and they apply themselves and they make a successful business out of it. They don't open up wineries. He said it took 2.5 years to open up his winery because of bullshit regulations. Okay, so why does your state keep adding them? If you understand how bad regulations are, why do you keep adding new ones? They asked about his dad, by the way, because his dad was an attorney for Getty Oil, right? Which a lawyer for an oil company has to be one of the scummiest people on the planet. I mean, this is the guy who's got to sweat a 19-year-old single mother out in court. I think your husband fell off that oil rig and broke his neck and died on purpose. He wanted the insurance money. I mean, that's the type of scumbag Newsom's dad was, to defend the oil companies in court. Right? So he said his dad panicked. He didn't say why he panicked, but he said his dad panicked, went into politics, lost, had a nervous breakdown, and fell off the face of the earth. That's what he said. But the relationship with his father makes no sense because he said that, but he also talks about how his family had no money because this is a new one. His family had no money despite his father being a successful corporate lawyer who later went on to be a judge, by the way. How often does that happen? Let me ask you a question. Because how does a judge just duck out and be a deadbeat dad who's not paying child support? Don't you think it would be pretty easy to find a judge to make him pay child support, to serve him with paper? I mean, it's not like he's at the courthouse every day where the summonses come out from. I mean, you could serve him a court summons by walking 2 doors down the hallway. But they had no money. This is a new one from rich kids. They were so broke, despite his dad being a successful corporate lawyer, because his dad was just so generous and couldn't stop donating all of their money to charity. That's a new one. Yes, my dad makes high 6 figures smearing and defaming victims of an oil company that's skirted by regulations, but he donates most of it to the Save the Dolphins Fund. We used to have this kid in high school who had a rich dad who owned like a trucking company, and we give him shit. We call him a Nepo baby and stuff. And he'd clap back and be like, I'm not rich, my dad is. It's like, that's what we're saying. But he didn't even cop out with the, well, he donates most of his money. You know, maybe his dad did donate most of his money and they were skirting by every week. Maybe. I don't know. But all we know is this guy's a habitual liar who cannot tell the truth.
Maybe his dad was just really stupid.
Yeah. Donated money to the blackjack table.
He's like the rich kid that tries to pretend he's poor.
He is.
To be more relatable, yeah, to fit in with everybody.
He's that kid that like scuffs up his new Nikes before he gets to school in the morning. You know, just fucks his hair up so it's a little disheveled. He's that type of guy. Oh, should we talk about Gavin's love life next? Why don't we dive into Gavin's love life? So in 2005, he had an affair with his chief of staff, campaign manager, and best friend. That was the same guy. It wasn't 3 different people. His best friend's wife while she was working as his secretary. Now, the best friend found out about it, confronted Newsom, and quit the same day. So do you know what Newsom did, Mia? While he was mayor of San Francisco? Called a press conference and told everyone, hey, I fucked my best friend's wife. If that is not, again, trying to paint himself as being sincere, as I'm taking my medicine, that's 100% a power move. 100%. Oh, I'll show you. I'll get the last laugh. I'll go on national television and tell everyone I fucked your wife and you can't do shit about it. In 2006, he dated a 19-year-old model named Brittany Mounts when he was 38 years old. While that's not illegal, we can all agree it's kind of creepy. A little creepy. And I guess he determined, or his consultants did, that wasn't good for his political career going forward. So they broke up. In 2007, shortly before he met his wife, his current wife, who's a film producer, he sought treatment for alcohol abuse. Obviously, that didn't last, the sobriety thing, because we played a clip of him on the show about a year ago where he was telling people that they need to just shut up, relax, and drink some wine. And if you know anything about alcoholics, they don't like to take the blame for their actions. And if you listen to the things that we have talked about with Newsom on here and his refusal to take any responsibility for anything he's ever done wrong, the one thing he'll even fess up to doing wrong, he finds a way to spin is not just somebody else's fault, but not as bad as you actually think it is. That is textbook alcoholic. They don't take responsibility for anything. Something tells me this guy does have a drinking problem and he actually needs to get help for it. I think he's got more than a drinking problem, though. Here's the lesson that we learned from this. Let's summarize it. Let's land the plane and wrap this up because I'm done talking about this guy. Here's what we learned from this. Tolerance and understanding only works when it is a two-way street, when it comes to opposing political viewpoints. The cat's out of the bag with Newsom. We know what he's about. You can go watch it. There's plenty of game film on him now. There's no more hiding any of it. If we're going to bring these people onto our platforms, they either have to, A, come to the table in good faith and be willing to actually discuss the merits of the things they're saying and the details of their plans and not deflect, but answer hard questions when they're checked on some of these things they're saying. Or we have to clap back at them. We can't do what Shawn Ryan did and let them just get away with it and just bank on the idea that your audience and the average person who's watching it is going to be smart enough to do that research for themselves, or even not even smart enough, have the time to do the research and look it up for themselves. Because I'm telling you right now, a lot of people don't have the time, nor do they care enough to do it. If they're going to use our platforms to lie, spin, and manipulate, we have to get aggressive with them. We cannot let them come on our... They believe me, if Newsom wants to go spew his shit unchecked, he can go on CNN, MSNBC, ABC, you name it, any day of the week, every day of the week if he wants to. They'd probably give him a show if he asked them nice enough. He can go on all those shows and do that. There's plenty of left-wing podcasts that would take him. If they're going to use our platforms, we have to check them, and we can't play nice with them. Be respectful. They're the guest. But it gets to a point, and I'm changing up how I'm going to start. First off, we'd have to find someone on the left of center with the balls to actually come on the show because they're a bunch of fucking pussies and retards. But the next left-wing guest we get on our show, the gloves are off. I'm not going to cuss at them and yell and scream. You're not getting away with this stuff anymore. It's no longer just a friendly conversation if you're not entering it in the same mindset. Right? If you're going to enter it of the mindset that I'm going to lie and cheat and try to dominate this conversation and spew a bunch of bullshit, I'm going to be a dick. And I think everyone else should be too. That's been our lead topic. Stay tuned. We got Store Brand TMZ coming up next.